when I was here in 2006, I was chairman of the Republican conference, and one of the things that I tried to do in the United States Senate was to try to bring the Republicans in the Senate into the 20th century, not 21st, just the 20th, latter parts of the 20th century, and it was a great opportunity for me to actually learn a lot about media, because as chairman of the conference, your responsibility is for communications. And so one of the things I tried to do early on was to try to use every technology available. One of the constant complaints I get, even today, and although I'd like to think it's waning, but I still get it today, which is conservatives / Republicans don't get our message out. And those of you who are a little longer in the tooth, there aren't too many of them here in the room, but this is a constant drumbeat from the folks out across America that we do not do a very good job of getting our message out. And candidly, they're right. Historically, they were right. The mainstream media, as we all know, was not particularly friendly to the message that we had, and that we had outlets, so to speak. And the outlet of the last 25 years was talk radio. The last 15 years, Fox News. And I believe the outlet going forward, new outlet going forward, or newer outlet, is a lot of the folks represented here in this room, and growing the conservative presence on the internet across the world. And I'm excited about that. I want to pose a challenge to all of you here today. And in a little while, I'm going to save some time, obviously, for questions. But we have some great challenges that we're facing. Talked about America's Foundation and my PAC, and the fact that I traveled around the country last year, in large part because I was scared. I think a lot of people who got involved in politics were just frightened at their core as to what was going on with this country, what was going on here in this city. This dramatic transformation of government and through Obamacare and a whole host of other government programs and regulations that continue to spew, in spite of the November election, out of this this group of progressives that are running the United States government right now. There was a real call, at least in my mind, to go out and tell people that this was the most important election in the history of the country, at least in my lifetime. And I always used to say, and I'm not even running. So I mean, it's the most important election. I ran 5 times, and it's more important than any of my elections, because I believed if we did not stop, or at least attempt to stop, what was going on with this administration and the Congress, we could go well past the tipping point as to what America is. I always talk about that America is not just a piece of ground. It's not an ethnicity. I always tell people you can go to France at 20 years of age, live there 50 years, and you're never a Frenchman. You can come here at 70 years of age and live here a day and be an American. Because America's about accepting an ideal. America's about accepting a way of life. And that way of life is and continues to be in jeopardy because of what's going on in this city more than any place else. Now, there are other cities involved too, Los Angeles, New York, and our culture. But from the government perspective, it's happening right here. And Republicans, conservatives have carped and complained about it for a long time, but we haven't really made the bold steps to really do anything about reversing it.
Many conservatives felt that the Republicans capitulated during that lame duck session in December. How do you feel about that? Do you think it could have been stopped in any way?
Well, I think they should have tried a lot harder to stop it. There were tactics available, including, taking the floor and holding it as long as you could, member after member, to try to slow this process down. Eventually they would have probably been able to succeed, but I think particularly the start and don't ask, don't tell, those 2 votes, I think are going to have serious consequences to the national security of this country. And we didn't seem to put up too much of a fight, and that's very disappointing.
And why do you think that is? I mean, Obama couldn't get this done earlier, and now he has just the short.
Because you had a Senate majority who was pushing to get these votes. You had the votes to pass them. Enough Republicans had splintered to get them the 60 votes that they needed to pass Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the 67 votes they needed to pass the START Treaty. And as a result, it was going to take a handful of members to come together to try to use procedural things to block them, and it was up against the Christmas holidays. And so I think they just said, it's going to pass anyway, so why try to fight it? I would think that there's certain things that are worth just trying everything you can, and it's unfortunately, I don't know. Some senators may have, but you didn't hear too much about it.
Republicans will be taking over the House tomorrow, and there'll be some new senators as well being sworn in, and that majority will now have shrunk for the Democrats. Do you think the Republicans will actually be able to get much of their agenda passed because the Democrats still will be in control of the Senate?
Well, they'll certainly pass the House, and they'll pass the repeal of Obamacare, and they'll pass spending cuts, and they'll pass entitlement reforms, and they'll pass provisions to try to slow down the implementation of both Obamacare and the financial services bill, which is, just going to cause real havoc among particularly small businesses and their ability to get money, and entrepreneurs and their ability to start businesses. I mean, again, this whole big regulatory morass that the Democrats believe in, it just benefits the big guys. It benefits the folks who have big compliance departments and lawyers who can figure out these regulations. But the little guys trying to get started, or the small banks, they're not going to be able to deal with this, and the cost is just prohibitive as to what's to be required. So it's going to have a huge economic impact on this country, and Republicans, I have an obligation to continue to do what they can to slow this thing down, fight the implementation of some of these rules and regulations that are even more expansive than what's being considered. I mean, you talked about the death panels the other day being reinstituted by executive order, well, not executive order, by a decision by the Secretary of Health. So they have this big debate on the floor of the House and the Senate about whether to include these end-of-life counseling sessions. They decide no, and the Secretary of Health, under her discretionary powers, says, "Oh, we're just going to put it back." It almost says, well, why is Congress necessary? But under the bill, there's, I think, 700 places that gives the Secretary the ability to promulgate rules and basically even change, in this case, change the intent of Congress in this law. So it's a big order for the House Republicans to try to slow this train down so things don't get even worse in healthcare and in the economy.
The news media has never really been very favorable towards the Republicans, and they've been watching the Tea Party very closely. What do you expect from the mainstream media going forward with this Tea Party, Republican Congress, et cetera?
Well, they're going to do everything they can to make the Tea Party and Republicans look bad. I mean, I always talk about, in the last election, the one pure Tea Party candidate who actually got involved in politics because he went to a Tea Party and then decided to run for Congress, actually run for the Senate, was the new senator from Wisconsin, Senator Johnson. Have you ever heard of his name? Does anybody ever in America even know anything about this man? You don't know anything about this man. Yet, if you're a somewhat controversial, a little bit, erratic person in the name of Christine O'Donnell, well, that's the Tea Party, you see. It's someone who, by the way, ran for office 3 times before, ran for the Senate before, has been involved in politics for 15 or 20 years. That's the Tea Party, as opposed to the guy who goes to a Tea Party and runs for Congress, and for the Senate. That's how the media can selectively frame, in the eyes of the American public, what these movements are all about, and it's dishonest. So don't expect honesty in the coming months, and that's why alternative media is such a very important part of getting the truth out as to what really is happening.
What do you expect to see going forward here in 2011, 2012 for the country?
Well, I'm hoping the economy recovers. I think the private sector they certainly have a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines. The concern I have is they've got a lot of cash. Businesses are by and large making profits right now, and they're learning how to do things with fewer people. And so unless there's reinvestment, new growth, you're not going to see the business is hiring back people anymore. They're making money, and there's no incentive to bring people back. So while there may be strong profits and strong, strong companies going forward, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be lower unemployment. And the difference is how are you going to get these people with this profits and cash on their balance sheet to deploy that capital to grow their business. And that's what I'm hoping, that we can do some things in the Congress, and the President will agree to try to incentivize the private sector to start deploying those resources.